Okay. We will go ahead and get started.
Okay.
Pull up my, so the main purpose of this meeting is two things. One, it's going to be for us to finalize the plan and show you what the plan is for the rest of the quarter.
Yes.
And then it's going to be what are us figuring out, what are the skills and knowledge that students need to succeed, both on Unit 4 and their CIA, and like what is the bar to assess that.
Okay.
And so those are going to be our two primary focus points. And to start off, I do want to show you something that will sort of, that I'll make sure that is shared with you, that you'll be using going forward before we even sort of jump in. So I went through and revised your AIM sequence for the rest of this quarter. And so these are aligned to what you'll see in, or what students will see in their Q4, or excuse me, in their Unit 4 assessment and in their CIA. Each of these are the objectives for the day, and then I've also gone ahead and linked the actual lesson plan that you will be internalizing, and it's already in your planning folder. So all of this is there, and it's just like a one-stop shop. You don't need to move anything, update anything. It's all going to be here. And I'll move this into your planning folder because I don't think it's there yet. And so just knowing that this will be the scope and sequence that we'll be tackling going forward. And with that, you'll want to communicate to students that on Friday, December 4th and Monday, December 4th, they'll have their Unit 4 assessment. So everything that they're doing here. And the earlier we can communicate that to students, the better.
Unit 4 assessment.
Sorry, Nikki, I just got really hot. That's why.
You've been doing a lot of running.
Okay. So I just wanted to show sort of the logistical framework before we dive into the sort of meat of what this meeting will be. Questions about any of this so far?
No.
Okay. So now I actually just want to delve into the thinking about Unit 4 itself. So the way that the rest of the quarter will look is you'll have Unit 4 and Unit 5 that will be trying to prepare students ahead of their end of quarter assessment. And so that'll be for, that is just for AP World. Your World History and Geo class is a little bit different. We can touch on that next week because it's a little less of a priority for us right now. Okay. So just starting off big picture, when looking at sort of like the unit plans and different components, what do you think is the main purpose of this Unit 4? Did you get a chance to look at it? What is the purpose of this unit in particular?
Cause and effect. Cause, effect, event, cause and effect.
Okay. Even more granularly, what are the sort of main events that are being highlighted to demonstrate that cause and effect?
Well, the connection of trade and motivation for the other things that trade created in terms of colonization, slave trade, different types of goods and services, shift in power as it related to countries, nations, and those that amass wealth as a result of this shift, and those that were subjugated to
Mm-hmm.
these occurrences.
And so when thinking even about like sort of what you named here, how is this unit allowing students to build on what they've already covered in AP World?
Okay, what we talked about today is I went over Chinese, Greek, Roman, Mongol, Mali, Europe, and asked the question, what do all these empires have in common?
Mm-hmm.
And so that's kind of the thread. And so they said, well, trade. Why trade? Because it impacted economic growth
Mm-hmm.
individually and as nations and leaders. Religion was also a part of that in terms of creating a common thread and also a common control and directing how people think and respond and how they see their place in the
Mm-hmm.
whole structure. We talked about conflict ever going as people scramble to try to position themselves. And so those are the kinds of things that I think tie in a continuation.
Yeah, and one thing that I would just add as we're thinking about this specific unit, and it's highlighted here in this question of, so to what extent are Eurocentric narratives that Europeans dominated the world politically, culturally, and economically from 1450 to 1750 CE accurate?
Mm-hmm.
And so I think one of the really important things about this unit is helping students to understand, what is it, the history is written by the victors, is that like like thinking about how has history or our perception of history really been influenced by this Eurocentric domination and sort of European domination from this time period. And I think that will be really helpful for students conceptualizing a lot of this content. And so with that, I want us to actually delve in to the Unit 4 assessment and really start looking at what are some of the key things that we want students to like make sure that they're demonstrating on this assessment. I know that you looked at the CIA. And what I want us to do is revisit Unit 5 in CIA in a couple of weeks and do a very similar kind of deep dive. But because Unit 4 is sort of we're hitting the ground running on Monday,
Yes.
I want this to sort of be like our anchoring point for this meeting. And so one thing I'm going to do is I'm actually just going to give you a little bit of time. I want you to look through the documents for this, and the document-based question, and just start thinking about what are the key things that students need to know. Okay, and you can just like list them out, and then we're gonna look at sort of like the exemplar things that it wants. But I'm gonna give you about 5 minutes just to look over it. You don't have to have it internalized by any means yet.
Okay.
And feel free to mark it up, and that is all yours. I know you're not done, and that's totally fine.
Okay.
One thing I want you to do, and you can do that kind of wherever, is when thinking about answering this question, what are the things that students have to do? And so it doesn't even have to be fully subject bound yet, but when answering that DBQ question, what are the steps students need to take?
First, read the question.
Okay.
And making sure they understand what the question is asking. And then find.
How do they do that? So if we were to look at, so go ahead and flip back to that question. So if you're preparing to answer that question, what are the steps that you take in order to do that? And you can just name them out and I can type them, but what are those steps?
Okay. First, the verb evaluate.
Okay.
Is saying specifically what, not come to a conclusion but to evaluate the impact based on information that's in the document. And the other word, transformed maritime trade, would be a focal point to answer the question. So evaluate how they transformed, they changed how maritime trade took place in the Indian Ocean in the 16th century. And so, and then from there, drawing upon the information that speaks to that. And so, with that said, the Portuguese, instead of going across land, decided that they could cut out. So they transformed. I'm sorry to deviate. They transformed trade by taking maritime routes versus overland, and what that did is it cut out. No, let me back up. With that, they also used advanced technology in a way to expedite getting from point A to point B, where the end game goal was to get directly to Asia, not having to go through. So they were able to do that. Based on this, it also created conflict. Everybody was not happy about that, and felt internal conflict amongst those that were used to doing things the old way, and interacting with merchants.
Yeah.
So those, I think, would be the
So I want to even take a step back. So if you'll flip it here.
Okay.
So, and I'm actually going to pivot to your side so that way I'm not having to try to read upside down.
Okay. Yeah.
Which is not a skill I have mastered yet. So, you were absolutely right when you were thinking about this as like the very first thing that they have to do is understand what the question's asking. It's read and understand it, right? And so one thing that we really want to prepare students, particularly as it relates to their document-based questions, is how do you sort of train your brain to look for the information the text is asking you to look for, right? And so you were right. So when I look at this question, you want to teach students how to read them in a way that is sequential and that they can sort of take away what those steps are. And so if I were to model for students how to break down this prompt, I would do a couple of things, and you did some of them when you just named. So great. First, the directions, all of them are important, right? So it's the following question is based on accompanying documents. the documents have been edited for the purpose of this exercise. And it even gives them their CFS. And so anytime they're kind of lost in the sauce of what to do.
Do you mind if I record this?
No. Absolutely not. I can also send you I'll send you that one.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah. So anytime that students get lost in the sauce or confused about what they can do, they can literally use this as a checklist. And like I would even say, tell them put little boxes by it as they go through, so they can be like, great, did this, so on.
Mm-hmm.
This will be the same pretty much like every time, because
Mm-hmm.
this is just the baseline criteria for success. So the modeling comes when actually how to break down the question.
Mm-hmm.
And so the question is, evaluate the extent to which the Portuguese transformed maritime trade in the Indian Ocean in the 16th century. Okay. So evaluate, you already identified that that's like a key word.
Mm-hmm.
So for students, this means you want them to circle that, annotate. Hey, this means to determine the impact. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
You're making a judgment here.
Mm-hmm.
Evaluate the extent to which the Portuguese, I'm going to underline that because that's my subject, that's what I'm really focusing on,
Mm-hmm.
transformed maritime trade in the Indian Ocean. Okay, so I'm looking for how do they transform maritime trade.
Mm-hmm.
And so if I'm a student, whenever I have this kind of prompt, I'm going to do what we call a do what chart.
Okay.
And so do what? And students should still be familiar. This is just a good sort of frame. And so it says evaluate, that's your do.
Mm-hmm.
It's just that verb.
Mm-hmm.
And then the what is the what are you actually evaluating? And it's this part that we just named. So
Mm-hmm.
the transformation of maritime trade by Portuguese. So now I, as a reader, now know that when I'm looking at each of these documents, I need to be looking for what transformation is, which is what? What's transformation?
Change.
Right?
Alter.
Right. So I'm just looking for where has maritime or sea trade changed.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's the framework.
Mm-hmm.
And so then whenever you have students approach the document, you want them to annotate specifically for like Portuguese
Mm-hmm.
and then change in maritime trade. And then that's every single thing they look for on the document. And we can go through a little bit later, like what the specific sort of like document 1, document 2, or excuse me, the like how do you do the gist statements and things for documents. But for right now, I want us to focus in on like this is what the breakdown is. Okay. And so if you're answering this question, you want to model for students how to break that down.
Okay.
And then from there, now that they know what they're doing, these are the things that they are then scored on. And so, like, do they have a clear thesis?
Mm-hmm.
Do they have that contextualization, the evidence from the document, so on and so forth, evidence beyond it, sourcing and complexity.
Mm-hmm.
And so you can sort of see what this looks like here. And so what I'm gonna actually have us do, because I know that time is short, what I'm gonna ask, and we'll finish this meeting up on Monday, I'll put something on our calendar,
Okay.
is I actually want you to go through for this AP World History exam for Unit 4
Mm-hmm.
and do the document-based question.
Okay.
I actually want you to answer it, and then using the rubric sort of determine what your, like, where it is you have met each of these criteria. And then what we'll do on Monday is we'll go through and we'll spar and see, like, what does an exemplar thesis look like? What does this look like? So that way, whenever we're pushing students, we can push them to that.
Okay.
Is that doable?
Yeah.
Cool. Questions, thoughts from there?
No.
Okay. when thinking about, or when you were taking notes on sort of the breaking down of the question, what were some of your biggest takeaways?
Making sure I define words that the verb, so people clearly understand, students understand what the verb is asking you to do. Looking for a subject. What's the subject that the verb is acting upon? And then bracketing, paying attention to all of the things that the question is asking and creating a checklist so that they can follow that as they're sifting through to obtain the information and answer the question.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think like the main purpose of when you're even like starting DBQ practice is like training your eye to know what to look for. Like that's the main thing. Is it's like students will kind of read and look for all of the things, but they shouldn't. They need to look for only this. And so that way, when they're looking at, so say like document 2, you can see, okay, great. So this is an official who's employed at a Portuguese trading post on the coast. Great. So like I already know who this is, and you know who your source is. And so then when you're going through Muslim, like you can start having them annotate and look for specifically where's their change. So like for this one, the Muslims in Calicut are rich and live well, and they used to control, and you can say like they used to control all the sea trade from that town. Like that right there, automatically you've got that used to. So that like when you're circulating, this is what students should be having.
Yes.
And then it's like if the king of Portugal had not discovered India, Malabar would already have been in the hands of the Muslims. And so like this is a big change, right? And you want students to be able to identify that, and that's what you should be looking for too. Cool. So I'm excited for us to continue this and dig into this on Monday.
Yes.
And then we'll pick this up and have us like just dive into the exemplar for this and really just like go all in on that, which I'm looking for. And so, yes.
Okay. All right. So I'm looking at resources that would mirror these standards. Would be in the plans.
Yes. So and like for this, like you don't need additional stuff for the test itself, but so in the plans, if I can remember what the heck it is I'm doing. Man, being congested just really does just ruin your brain. Okay. So I did already have it in here. So if you scroll down, and I would even like start this. This is the document that it will be like. This is like your hub. This is everything that you need, or like is your starting point. Just if you'll click out, and then just double click this. So on Monday you can click on where it says 34, and then click on that. And this plan is already in your planning folder, so you don't need to do anything other than actually start doing like the plans like you would. And so you'll go through sort of these, and it goes through the different like the aligned standards. It even gives you these like the thinking points and the procedural keys, and so you can start figuring that out. Yes, I think that should be the basis. Go ahead.
This is just one lesson.
Yes, this is just
4.
Yes, and then so like if you click on the aim sequence again. Yeah, so it's by date. So like
okay, got it.
this is Monday's lesson. This is Tuesday's lesson. And so it's in order. So all you got to do is whenever you're prepping it, and ignore the numbers because of the time, we kind of had to pick the priority lessons.
Okay.
So you'll just click on it, and then that's where you'll do it. And it's that way for both AP World and then World History and Geo is the same.
Okay.
And so you'll just, so when you want to look at World History and Geo's lessons, this is that tab. So just click on that, and it's the same kind of deal. They're all there. And then their exam, if you scroll down, I actually don't know if they've got an exam until, they don't have an end of unit exam just because of timing. And so that's okay.
Okay.
Yep. Other thoughts, questions before we wrap up?
But they have a final.
They will have a final, yeah.
Yes. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
It's from 34 to now. Are there days I should try to double up?
No, just I'm gonna add in like some homework stuff this weekend, just so that they'll for other just homework so they can kind of get additional content at home. But no, just using those. Yeah, that should be pretty solid.
Okay.
Yeah. Cool. So in closing here, what is your action step for the weekend before we meet on Monday?
Is to go through this, develop my own response,
Yep.
diagramming, following the checklist.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Cool. That's all I got. Okay, cool. I will in just a second send to you the
Calendar.
that is it. Yep, that's
Okay.
again, I'm just like it is whew, I've got congested and then my brain said okay, cool.
Okay.
I'm here if you need me.
All right. Thank you.
No problem.
And I got that other thing to get to you for that.